The limitations of the troopers' tactics were soon evident. Dismounted, the cavalry had no mobility, and the need for horse holders reduced a quarter of their available firepower.
The United States military was trained to fight a conventional standing army, the Prussians, the French, whatever. They were not trained to fight the Great Plains Indians.
So why did the U.S. Army fail to adjust to the Indian tactics?
The Army was very rigid, by the book, didn't have a lot of room to ad lib. So in an open fight on a dusty, hot ridge, the conventional Army was probably at a disadvantage.
As the warriors closed in on Custer's right wing, Indian accounts describe Captain Keogh's desperate retaliation.
About 40 of the soldiers came galloping from the east part of the ridge within Lake Northern Cheyenne.
But the Indians counterattacked and the soldiers fell back. Tactics were designed to control men and direct firepower. So what happens when fear and panic sets in?
Under extreme duress, panic can overcome and people bunch together. So I thought that would be recognizable in the archaeological record, and there it was.
There is one place on the battlefield where cartridges form skirmish lines, and nearby a cluster of cartridges suggests that troopers began bunching in panic.
And that bunching, as archaeology shows, took place right in here.
Was Calhoun Hill the turning point where the battle was lost? Richard Fox combed through Indian accounts for corroboration.
The archaeology indicated the transition from tactical stability to tactical disintegration. And I found that in the eyewitness testimony given by warriors who were here.
The Indian accounts describe the soldiers' panic.
The white men acted as if they were beside themselves, shooting wildly in the air. White Bull, Cheyenne.
One of the elements that exacerbated the panic and fear that developed here was the disparity between soldiers who were mounted and those who were dismounted. And in the end, the entire right wing disintegrated.
It's the evidence of matching cartridge cases that reveals the flight of guns and men away from Calhoun Hill.
Captain Keogh's Company I fell here. From here, right-wing survivors fled north towards the left wing, which would eventually end up on Custer Hill. The archaeology here indicates it was a pretty one-sided affair. Not much evidence of cartridge cases on behalf of the soldiers, but lots of Indian bullets. And Indian accounts speak of a very terrible event, too. They speak of riding up and striking soldiers down, soldiers firing wildly in every way, some feigning death. Runzie enemy said it was like a stampede of buffalo.
Almost the entire right wing was slaughtered on the desperate running fight to Last Stand Hill.
For decades, these markers were interpreted as a skirmish line, but in the context of the Custer myth, the gallant last stand of the last man and the last bullet, probably not so. Probably flight.
The battle was already lost. Custer had fatally split his command and now lost half of it. But why did the tactics and stability of Custer's right wing fail so dramatically? The answer may lie with the different types of guns used on the battlefield.
This particular weapon was the primary weapon used by the 7th Cavalry troopers. What we have here is an 1873 Springfield carbine. This is a single-shot weapon, trap door. Had a range of 600 to 700 yards, which in the hands of a trained cavalryman could do considerable damage. Shoots a little high, Doug, but when you shoot this, you really are going back in time. Yeah.
Range, stopping power, and accuracy made the Springfield superior to any Indian weapon. But it had one major disadvantage against the Indians' weapon of choice.
And the Henry rifle is an outstanding weapon in terms of its rapid fire capability. You could load and fire cartridges in a matter of seconds. The Henry was highly effective within a 200-yard range, and the warriors eventually got within 200 yards and were able to use the Henry rifle quite effectively.
With warriors in close, the advantage swung to whichever gun could fire more rapidly. A 30-second test reveals the answer.
Experience as to what this was really like.
Okay. Well, let's do a time check. How many can I get? How long it takes to get the 13 rounds off compared to how many you get off? Let's do it. Seconds.
How many did you fire?
13 rounds in 30 seconds.
I got 4 off.
At close quarters, the Henry rifle is 3 times more effective than the Springfield carbine.
The troopers lost their standoff capability because of tactical disintegration. They were not able to concentrate their firepower, and as a result, the Indians were allowed to get closer and closer and closer, and consequently, the repeating weapons came into play. The end result is complete chaos on the part of the troopers.
Forensic evidence shows that the Indians had over 200 repeating rifles.
The amount of firepower that the Indians had, the types of weapon that they had, was the key in their defeating the U.S. cavalry in that particular battle. No question about it.
At the battle, the right wing collapsed and ran in flight towards Custer and the left wing. Of the 120 men in the right wing, only 20 survived to join Custer and the left wing on Last Stand Hill.
105 men left in the battalion, half the battalion. Clearly, the defensive has begun. The offense is lost.
The archaeology confirms that the Indians now had many Springfield carbines taken from dead and wounded right-wing troopers on Calhoun Hill. These guns were leveled at Custer's desperate men huddled together on Last Stand Hill.
The Indian accounts leave clues that shortly after consolidation on Custer Hill, there were attempts at reorganization, trumpet calls, men shouting and barking orders. And shortly after these attempts, 40 dismounted men came rushing off the hill toward the river. Accompanying the men were anywhere from 5 to 9 riders.
Those on foot took to the gully, while the mounted ones tried to get away. He-Dog, Oglala-Sioux.
And they say the riders rushed south, but they also tell us that none of them ever made it beyond the battlefield.
Warriors, including Crazy Horse, were swarming around Custer Hill. A few soldiers were still alive. Sensing the end, they too ran in panic.
The troopers jumped up and started to run towards the river. They did not fire back. Big Beaver, Northern Cheyenne.
And in the meantime, the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors were coming. We had them surrounded, and in a little while they were all dead.
Last Stand Hill was where the bodies of Custer and his immediate command were found. Below is a line of markers indicating the route of flight to a place called Deep Ravine.
This enduring myth, I think in the public's imagination, is here at Last Stand Hill, that this is where the last gallant fight occurred. And we both agree that isn't quite the case.
That's right. It was a desperate struggle here on the hill, and it was a matter of life and death, and I think we can all relate to that. But it was over in minutes.
Few trooper cartridge cases have been found on Last Stand Hill, but many Indian bullets. The archaeological evidence for a heroic last stand is non-existent.